Okay, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to another March Monuments Sportive, week 3, and we have the last 96 kilometres of the Paris Roubaix route. So we had the race yesterday, and that was quite a fast and exciting affair. So I'm rather looking forward to today. Let's see what happens with the sportive riders, whether they're going to race it or whether they're going to group up and stay together. Certainly for the first part of the ride, we got a good lineup, 32 online so far, so that's not a bad turnout. And I expect you can see Rackles is asking how long. It'll be about 2.5 to 3 hours, 2.5 for the front of the group and just over 3 hours for the tail enders. So yeah, should be a good ride. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the whole event, but I will be popping off midway for a coffee and a sandwich. So I'll leave it on the camera on main view while I'm away, but generally I'm here for the full 3 hours commentating and giving my insight on the ride, and then we'll cover all the riders coming into the finish at the end of the ride. And usually we get some late joiners as well, so although we got 35 now on the line, that may well increase. Now I have to jump on the bike to make a start of the ride, make sure I stay in. So we'll spin the pedals round and away we go. There we go. That'll do. And now I can start my commentary. So we got James Chang, running off the front again. That's no surprise really. He's always one of the front runners earlier on in the rides. Did the same, I think, last week, was it? So yeah, let's have a spin round and see what's happening to the group. I would expect a fairly large group to stay together, but you can see that Chang's pulling a small group just off the front, but this should hopefully, the chasers that you can see behind should hopefully join these front riders and form up into a decent sized group, a biggish group. And then obviously you're going to have the riders who are taking it a little bit easier, because this is a fast opening pace, and not everybody's going to want to treat it as a race. So some of the riders further back are going to ease up and not chase to get onto this group. But it's always easier riding in a large group if you can put up with the initial opening pace. You can clearly see here the second group on the road trying to close this small gap, and I think they will do so, but that's going to hurt. It's never easy closing up a gap so early in a ride. So let's just have a quick look at them and see what kind of numbers they're doing. There we go, they've just joined the back end now. So these riders will join that front group. And we'll just have a look and see what's happening. You see, that's the first group on the road now, the tail end of it. And then this is the second group on the road. And again, the riders here will form up into a nice cohesive group. And these riders should stay together for a little while. But even this pace, even in the second group, it's they're not hanging about. So I'll work my way back and we'll have a look and see who's behind the second group on the road. Yeah, and they look like they're out for a Sunday stroll, which they are, of course. So Lang and Artan, just enjoying themselves. We've got a few more riders a bit further back. We've got Nice here, and then we've got Nick. I think he's trying to close up on the riders in front. Hal Ibex, he's not doing very much what kilos at the moment, so I expect it's just here for the ride. You have different types of riders taking part in sportives. You've got the we got Wolfram, and then we got May. For some reason, putting out really good wattage, but way off the back. Now May took part in one of the races the other day and got absolutely smashed by the two riders he was with. So he's a strong rider and hopefully learn from his experience. I expect him to come and maybe May will actually start to catch this group in front and then hopefully help to pull them along as well. So just like to get back to the front of the group, we've got how many riders? Let's take an overhead shot and see if we can count how many riders we've got in the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've got 14 riders in the front group. So I would expect them to stay together for at least a little while. There's no sense in anybody trying to jump off the front at this point. And then working his way through this group and looking at the next group on the road. Let's see if we can find a better view. It's a bit difficult with the trees. Yeah, Paris has been just distanced slightly. May well get back on, or may well be picked up by riders in the chasing group, and they're 100 meters further back. But you can see there's a few riders just broken up trying to stay with the front group, and obviously they didn't have the strength to close the gap, so that's why they split up on the road. But this small group will pick them up, and if they've any sense they'll just get in amongst them and then continue to ride with this group. So then we'll have two clear groups on the road. Some good riders in this group that I recognise. Van Brekel. Schumann's just starting. So they will be picked up by Tan and Zonka. Lang and Kindin. But the man to watch is this Team A. He's scything his way through the field and coming back to the groups in front. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get all the way back to the front. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he had a dropout, or maybe he was just late to the party, late starting. Could have been. But whatever, he's certainly he's not hanging about. You can see from his kilos. He's putting in a good effort to try and get back with the group. And there they are at the front. So now the course, it doesn't lend itself really to breakaways in the early part. purely and simply because there's no hills. The slight rises that you can see on the profile don't really happen until the halfway point or just before the halfway point. So my guess is that you're not going to have anybody pushing and trying to split these groups up. You may well have the odd riders raising the pace, but you're not going to see big splits in these groups until well into the ride. So, from in terms of a commentator's job today, it's going to be a pretty dull affair, I think. And I say that nicely. Um, I'm not being off when I say dull. What I mean is there's not going to be an awful lot of action um, to commentate on in this early part of the ride, purely and simply because the race yesterday, obviously we had team tactics, and we had some really good team tactics yesterday. The Razio racing team in particular were working over OTR's main contender, Maxime Turcotte, and their rider Jan Dekker was obviously, in my mind, was favourite for the win if they stayed together as a group, because he's got such a good sprint, and that's the way it turned out. Although I have to admit, at the end, I didn't think he was going to win it because one rider was allowed to ride off the front and almost took the win. So yeah, it was a good race yesterday, and commentating on the tactics was pretty interesting. There was a lot of really good tactics from both OTR and Razio Racing, and a few other um, teams that didn't have many members in, or at least I couldn't identify them because it's a bit difficult unless you've either put the name of your team in your name or you're wearing their jerseys. Now, one of the OTR boys yesterday wasn't wearing their team jersey, so it took me to a while to pick up that he was in the team. I should have done so, but yeah, and that can be a problem for me as a commentator, knowing who's in whose team. So you can often see tactics going on the road and not realise that it's the same team that are doing the pushing off the front or raising the pace. And RR Razio Racing yesterday totally bossed the race. They pushed up the pace. They certainly tried to work Maxime Turcotte on the OTR team over, but to be fair, they didn't do so. I mean, it wasn't until the end of the race that the strongest rider, Jan Dekker, showed his true mettle. I mean, he finished with a phenomenal sprint. So if you haven't seen that, check out the video. The full video is online on my channel, and it's well worth a watch because the team tactics were fantastic and the racing was pretty exciting. But these boys aren't hanging around. You can see the lads on the front are certainly pushing up the pace. So this is once again a fast pace for a sportive, and have we still got 14 riders? It's easier when you're racing to count the riders because obviously you get the numbers. In the sportive, you don't get the numbers, so you have to manually count them, and that's not always easy. But while you might well get a rider coming to the front and pushing the pace up slightly, this is going to stay together. So we'll take a look at what's happening behind them. So we'll work his way through this pack and have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 14 riders here. So we'll keep an eye on that number. And obviously when it changes, Poirier is 440 meters behind, and he's pegging it at that. So you never know. He could close the gap. It's a tough ask though because the front group are are putting in a good old pace, but he's doing well. He is actually clawing back a few meters, so he could get back to the front group. We'll come back and have a yeah. He is. He's closing the gap, so we'll come back and have a look at Poira later, and then you can clearly see in the distance the small group that have picked up the riders on the way. They've two more to pick up. Well, three of you include, and look at May. Just look at the way he's absolutely bossing through the thing. Now, having said that, he's still doing over 5 kilos, and he's been doing that for the last 5 minutes. That's pro level riding. So, don't know. He's easing off now, but to keep that going for such a long time is pretty. Yeah, he's obviously a very strong rider, and he will get back to the front group. There's no doubt about that because he's doing far more kilos than any of the riders currently on the road. I'm not calling him out, but I don't know. This just looks unrealistic to me. Anyway, so this is the second group on the road. They've picked up individual riders in between. Obviously, Mr. May went straight through them, the pace he was going. But these lads are not hanging about, and they are actually closing up on the front group, which is good to see. So, given a little bit more time, they could well, they could well all merge into one unit. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. And you can tell the pace is high because obviously riders are being, distanced at the back and struggling, like Strauss here. He's really got to, yeah, he's putting out 5.5 kilo. He's got to really push here, and when he gets to the wheels, he's got to ride through them. He's got to get to the front or near the front, because if he doesn't, it will just yo-yo. The yo-yo effect will come into thing. He'll start to think, "Oh, I've made it," and ease up, and then before he knows it, he finds himself out the back. But he's done the perfect thing. Look, he's now made his way to the front. Okay, he doesn't want to put his nose in front, but he does want to ride alongside the front riders. Take a breather, make sure that when he eases up, he's not yo-yoing back off the back, and that's the classic mistake. And for a long time, it's a mistake I made until I got used to the drafting dynamics on RGT. But he's done well. He's got back in, and he's got good position as well. And then behind them, excuse me, a further 110 meters behind, you've got Sorensen. So he's currently out on his own. Now he'll either get picked up by the riders behind him, or he may well have the strength to catch. No, he hasn't. Looking at his kilos, he's not going to catch the group in front. So his only hope now is really to be picked up by riders behind him. And here we've got, as you can see, 3 on the road. So I've mentioned in almost all my streams that it's really hard knowing what to do when you're riding on your own. Do you sit up? Do you wait for the riders behind? Do you continue your current pace? Do you up your pace? And it's an individual thing, and only you know the answer to that question. But sometimes tactics can play a big part when you're doing a ride of this length. I mean, for most of these riders at this point in the rider's not in the front groups. We're looking at 3 hours. So that's a long time on the road, and anything can happen, anything can change. You've got to weigh up: am I going to finish the ride strong? Am I going to push and possibly not finish the ride? And no, it's an individual thing. I'm not going to tell the riders how to ride because this is not a race. It's supposed to be for fun. I mean, the riders at the front are definitely treating it as a race, as do all sportive riders um, who are trying to be first finisher. It's definitely a race for them, but not everybody in a sportive is racing it. And you can see this is our Lantern Rouge. This is Mr. Wolfer. So he's last man on the road, if you don't count me. And obviously, when I tab down, that takes us back to the front. So using the keyboard to tab through the field, Wolfer was last man. And when I hit the down key, we go straight back to the front of the ride. And it does look like they've got rid of, I'm saying got rid of, that we've had a rider. Oh, there's one there. Let's work his way back and see. I think they've distanced at least one rider. Yes, they have. So you can see he's just 20. Let's spin the camera around and then we can actually see this lad trying to catch them. There he is. Now he's got to work extremely hard to close that gap. And I don't envy him. It's a horrible situation to be in when you're trying to close up gaps from 20, 30 meters behind. It really hurts because you think you're getting there, and if the group make a surge around a bend like they did there, you've still got to keep your power high in order to get back. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through the trees. And he's got back, and again, really good riding. He's gone towards the front. He doesn't want to push his nose off the front, but he's second wheel at the moment, which is really good riding because being so far up the group, he can afford to sort of like draft now a little bit and take it. Although he's pushing his nose out the front, which I wouldn't have done, but he obviously feels good. And there he is at the back. You see, now that's the danger. If you catch a group and you whiz all the way through the group to the front, and then you start pushing your nose up your front, you're gonna be tired. There's no nobody's that strong that they can sort of like keep closing up gaps from 20, 30 meters behind and then go to the front of the group, push the nose in the wind and not feel it. And then obviously you end up at the back again and you end up having to work a little bit harder. The best place to be if you're catching a group, closing the gap and catching a group, is second or third or fourth wheel. That's the perfect place to be, just depending on the size of the group, of course. And just tick the pedals over. Don't push your nose into the wind. Just let the guys in front of you do the work. And because you've done the work to get back to the group. Okay, let's work his way down through this group and see who else we've got. So you've got Rackles. He's 50 meters off that group in front. As you can see, you can just see. Let's turn the camera for you. There you go. So he's going to struggle, but he's got May coming up fast behind him. And what could happen is he can wait for May to catch him and then sit on May's wheel. Although it does look like May is now starting to slow to a more respectable pace. He's probably exhausted, poor fella. There he is. He's throwing out 5 kilos like he was doing. He must be absolutely gasping, and he's still doing 3. So he's done well to get so close to this second group, and the second group may catch the first. We'll look into that dynamic later. There's lots of time for groups to chase, to catch, to be dropped. There's a lot going to be going off with this ride because of the terrain It's not particularly difficult, but the few risers that there are, what I call the kickers, will definitely help the lighter riders. And let's just answer Racco's while we let's get back to the front, see what's happening, and we'll answer Racco's. Okay, let's see if we can find a better view and do another head count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 12. So we got 12 in this front group. So they've managed to shed 2 riders. And that's just the attrition. The group will thin down even more, but not for a while, I wouldn't have thought, because if you look at the terrain they're on now, the white paddle is showing where the camera is currently focused, which is the front of the race. So where you can see the white paddle on the like the lollipop sign on the profile, that's where the current front of the ride is. And you can see it's almost pan flat for at least another 10 kilometers. So I don't expect much change from this group in that 10 kilometers. But then when they start to get into the kickers, um, and there I think you may well see more riders dropping off the back. And the lighter riders will obviously be at a bit of an advantage on the kickers, but they're not long enough to make a big difference. So you're not going to get a light rider jumping off the front and keeping a gap, because this course profile just doesn't lend itself to that kind of riding. The kickers are just not long enough and not steep enough. We've got one rider. If I work my way through this group, you can see that I think it's Nagy who's struggling at the back and may well have to do a bit of a sprint. There he is. So he's got to close up the gap, and I always like turning the camera around. Whoops, the daisy. There we go. Turning the camera around to see how he's doing, because then we can actually follow him on the road and see whether he's closing the gap. I mean, you can follow the figures given in the ride, but it's nice to see it on the screen in real time. And you can see that he is closing the gap, but this is what we call burning matches. He's definitely going to pay for this later in the ride. So again, trees are making this really difficult from this view. Needs to get into the group rather than hanging about at the back. There he is. It can be difficult to find the perfect view on this course because it's so twisty and trees line both sides of the tarmac. So it's from a sort of like technical point of view, it's very difficult trying to find a nice camera view for you, but one that isn't obscured by the trees. And obviously I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can pan around as I do. But let's work his way back and see what's happening behind this group. Yeah, and Verena. Are they the second group on the road? I'm totally lost now. I really wish I had the ability to be able to. Yeah, this is first group on the road. The ability to be able to choose riders with my mouse rather than having to using the down arrow key. I'm never quite sure where I am in terms of the groups. For the sporties, for the racing, it's much easier because every rider's numbered. But for the sportives, I can't tell where I am until there we go. That's the last rider that I've highlighted now. So when I page down, this is the second group on the road. So I have to pay particular attention to watching the group and making sure I'm on the last rider before I flick to the second group. And again, to work my way through this group, I have to find the last rider, which, because the riders are constantly changing position, it's not always easy to do so. You can see Van Brekel is second from last, but he's about to be overtaken. So Van Brekel is going to be the last rider on the road, and he's come forward. So there he is. Van Brekel was the last rider on the road. So when I hit the down arrow, I should automatically be taken to the riders behind, which are Mayer and Rayner. And they're 800 metres off the pace at the moment of the small group in front. And the gap's growing, so it's unlikely they're going to close that gap anytime soon. And Sorensen is still out on his own. But I suspect that Sorensen will get picked up by this small group here. And hopefully we'll be able to ride with them. Now this is quite nice because a few riders that were riding on their own have actually come together to form up this group. I mean, you had Lang and Tan and one other rider were riding as a threesome, whereas this group now has formed into a 6-rider group. So that's quite nice. Makes sense to stay in a group, and if these two can join them, although they're over a kilometre off the pace, but if they could join. Oh, this looks like a couple. There we go. Yeah. Okay. It'll rebuild the scenery and I'll be back with the ride in a minute or so. This is becoming really frustrating for me. Having to jump on the bike when I'm covering an event of this length at least every 25-30 minutes is really getting annoying. So I'd really like RGT to give people like myself, commentators, privileges so that we don't have to jump on the bike. You know, we should be able to commentate on these races because I cover the time trials, I cover road racing, I cover events like this, and I should be able to do it without having to constantly remember to jump back on the bike. I mean, you can set alarms, but even that gets annoying with alarms going off every 25-30 minutes. So that's my only gripe with this. The commentators software, the spectate mode they call it, is fantastic. I really do enjoy using it. I like the way they've done it. The only thing I don't like is what's happening here. And yes, it's my fault for not getting on the bike, but I shouldn't have to. I'm commentating on a race. Well, on a ride. It's not a race today. Yesterday was a race. But you get the point. I'm commentating. Why should I need to constantly get back on the bike? Gripe over. If RGT are listening, can you please do something about it? Okay, so we're back with the ride and back with the commentary. So this is the front group once again. And looking at it, not much change here. Let's zoom out and have a look and see from the overhead how many riders we've got. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, so no change here. And let's check out what's happening behind them. Which is the last one? Okay, so group 2 now, there's no individuals between these two groups. So you've got just over a kilometre between the two groups. So in theory, it could come back together, or the front group could open up the gap. I'm hoping it comes back together. I'm hoping this small group can close the gap. How many are in this group? Have we got 7? Well, a few more actually. Let's see if we can count them. 10. So if they could join the front group, that would make a nice big group of 24 riders. I mean, we've had a couple of late joiners. You can see there's 37 riders now in the event. So obviously, I don't count. I have to get on the bike, but I don't count as a contestant. So 36, which is not bad. Okay, let's work his way back and see what's happening further down the field. Wendland looks like he's just getting distance slightly, but he may well get back to them. Yes, he will. Yeah. Just wait for him to make the catch and then we'll have a look behind. Really hard work when you're closing up a gap like this, and the trees are just so difficult to try and get a view around them sometimes. Is he going to close the gap? He's certainly putting in the work. To find a good view of, so that we can actually see the effort he's putting in, and sure enough, he's going to go to the right hand side of the group, and he's made it back, but that must have hurt. Now he needs to join these two riders, and they need to close up. Come on, there he is, doing a bit of drafting. So that's a good effort by Wendland, a really good effort to close that gap, because that must have hurt. And then you've got Field, and he's dropped off, and he's now 700, 800 meters behind, and the gap's going out. So I suspect with Wendland, he'll be picked up by these riders behind, and the three of them could well end up riding together for a little while. And then this is effectively the third group on the road, these 6. Or is it 5 now? 6 riders. So, but they're a good 1,300 meters behind. So, not sure what's going to happen with this group. Whether they'll end up picking up the riders behind, or whether they'll pick up a couple of the riders in front of them. And then these two are currently, well, I thought they were last riders on the road, but it looks like Sorensen is the last rider on the road, although no, he's stopped. Well, let's see what's happened with Sorensen. He's stopped for the time being. My apologies, we got Wolfer. So Wolfer is currently our Lantern Rouge. last man on the road. Sorensen has stopped now. It could be a technical dropout or whatever. He may well get going again, so I'll keep an eye on him. These two are working well together. But this small group, let's have a look. Have they managed to close up any of the Yes, they have. So they're closing up on the group in front of them. So sorry, let's get back to the front. There we go. As I say, from a commentating point of view, not much action is going to happen at the front of the race because of the profile. These riders are going to try and stay together pretty much the majority of the ride, and the profile lends itself to that happening, and it's more than likely to come down to a sprint like it did yesterday in the race. Unless you have one rider in amongst this lot that really feels like I'm strong enough to do a solo break, then this is going to come down to a sprint. And my guess is that's what's going to happen. It will come down to a sprint. I can't pick out any one rider in amongst this group who I think is going to ride away from them. But it's too early to make that call, and I'm not going to do so just yet. We'll know when we start getting into the kickers whether we've got a really strong individual amongst this group. And when I say a really strong individual, obviously, I'm talking about somebody that's head and shoulders above the majority and just sitting in. And that's, now he's just distanced off the back. So this rider is 16 meters off the back. Let's see if we can just find him on the road. There we go. And you can see how difficult he's actually freewheeling here. Has he? No, he's on his way again. 4.6, 6.3. So he's going to have to really put in the red numbers in order to close this gap. You can see, look, a horrible place to be, trying to close a gap of a group that are just riding away from you. And the two figures to watch here is his own watt kilos, which you saw go in red, and then watch the distance to the group, and that gives you a clue on whether he's closing up or not. And you can see that it's currently 38, 35, 34. So he's not really closing the gap. He's pegging it. He's keeping it within manageable. I'm trying to get through the trees. There we go. So he's pegging it at 38 meters, but not closing. Look, he is now just. This is so difficult. And by the time he gets to this group, he's going to be exhausted. I mean, you have to admire riders like this that refuse to be dropped, and keep working away to try and get back. Because trust me, the red figures means he's working really, really hard, and this is hurting. And he's almost there, 7 meters off. And if the front group just put in a spurt, then he has to do so himself. Red numbers again. What a fantastic catch. That's what I want to see in terms of we obviously have to choose riders who are the most combative or who do the best teamwork or, who do catches like that. I mean, that was a superb catch. Well done. And let's hope he doesn't just, the yo-yo effect almost invariably happens when you catch a group and you've very little left and you don't get chance to recover. But it looks like he's okay. It looks like he's going to be okay. So even amongst the sort of like what I call the dull part of the ride, which is just watching the front group just changing pace, you have excitement watching riders getting dropped off the back and getting back in. So there's always something to commentate on. And then we have the second group, and the gap has grown. So they're not actually closing the gap at the moment. It was 1.3 and now it's 1.6 kilometres. So this gap has gone out, the front group. And that's another reason why I think that effort we saw a moment ago to close the gap by the rider that was dropped was such a good effort, because they were pushing the pace up. The group was pushing the pace and he was having to really, really work hard. They weren't giving it to him in closing the gap. Now this group are trying to peg the distance, but it's staying steady. So they're not really losing any time, but they're not really gaining. The distance is staying more or less the same. So they're virtually doing the same pace as the group out front. Now the key here is to find your strongest riders and get them to come on the front and pull you along for a little while. But we'll check what's happening behind these as well. So Wendland is really in no man's land at the moment. He's 500 and odd metres away from the group in front, and a further similar distance to one rider behind him, which is Field. So they could well end up joining together. In fact, you've got Rayner's just joined you've got Field, and then 500 metres behind you've got Rayner and Mayer. So they could come together. There's 4 riders there that could well end up joining forces. And then this nice little group, they seem quite content just to do their own thing, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. They just, I mean, K Lang he's a regular on these rides, but you've got 3 Canadians in this group, so obviously friends, obviously staying together as a unofficial team, or they may well be team members. Who knows? And then you've got the don't know if it's husband and wife, but you've got the Hal couple. And last man on the road, you can see that Sorensen hasn't got going again. So last man on the road is Wolfer. And then, of course, we're back to there's Sorensen. We're back to the front end of the ride. And how many riders have we got now? We've got 10 riders, so the group is being thinned down even more. We'll do a quick check and see what's happening behind them by swinging the camera around. And there you can see they've dropped another rider. Now I'm going to be interested to find out who that is. So let's flick through the group, find the last man in this group. Deshablis, I think. And there we go. So Leon is 60 metres adrift and putting in an effort to try and close the gap. So what I'm going to do is, once again, let's catch up with Leon and see whether he can close the gap. We watched the other rider, but this is a little bit more, they're on a slight upslope, so the group in front could well pull away from him here. But to his credit, he's working hard and he's pulling them back. Well, he's pegging it. So what do you think? Is he going to pull this back or is he going to fall off? When it gets out to like a 40, 50 meter distance, then my feeling is that riders drop like this don't get back on because they just have to put in too much work for too long, unless they're really strong riders. But it's fluctuating. He's got it from over 50 to mid 40s now. So can he close the gap? You can see he's in the red and the gap is currently at about 40 meters, slightly less now. So he's really, really working hard here. I've nothing but respect for riders that do this because I know how difficult it is. I mean, the red numbers means he's at threshold, so it's heartbreaking when you see a rider, giving absolutely everything, get to within, shall we say, 10 or 12 meters, and then suddenly find that he can't close that final distance and start to drop off. I do think that Leung is going to get back. Um, he looks like he's pacing himself because his numbers are going red but not staying red. So he's pacing himself, he's putting in efforts to close up. And slowly, I mean, he's taking his time as well. He's not trying to do it all in one burst. So I think he is going to get back, but this is hurting. Wonderful ride. 20 meters. Can he? And there you can just see we lost another. Now that looked like a dropout. That was such a sudden fluctuation in suddenly moving and then not that oh, what's happened to Leung as well? Has he had a dropout? Oh no, that's not fair. No, that's totally out of order if he's had a dropout. He doesn't deserve that. Let's swing around and see if we can have a look on the road. Yeah, he's definitely gone. So I'm work my way through this group and see what's happened. This is the other rider that we saw, and he had a dropout. His was a definite dropout. So he's now 190 odd meters behind, and he's definitely not going to close the gap. So this fella had a dropout, but it looks like this is the rider that closed the gap earlier, if you remember. So I did say when he got back in he'd done really well, but I did say he would pay for it. And now you can see he is paying for it because he's actually finding that he can't maintain the group's pace because he's just burnt too many matches trying to pull them back. I mean, really good riding by this rider to close the gap in the first place, and you can understand why he's been distanced again because when you watched back the catch he made, it was a phenomenal effort, and the poor guy is just absolutely knackered. There's no two ways about it. And then this is the group behind him, but they're a good way behind him, so he's not going to sit up and wait for this group because they're basically a K and a half away from him. So he'll continue to ride on the road, and eventually this group probably will pick him up. But it doesn't make any sense for him to sit up and wait for them. You're looking at 3 or 4 minutes before they could close the gap, and that's just not nonsensical. And then Wendland is still in no man's land. Mayer and Rayner have split up, but I think we'll come back together again. you can see Rayner putting in an effort to catch him, which I think he'll end up doing. And then this is that nice small group, but they don't really want. They're on one of the kickers, so that's why they're spread out, because obviously you're going to have stronger riders on the kickers. But it would make sense if they stayed together. Knees running off the front like this is fine, but he's not going anywhere because there's no rider within reasonable distance in front of him, and the group behind, he's got a 46-meter gap. He might as well ride with the group. There's no sense in him riding on his own, and in fact the group were going to pick him up, and so they're going to come back to, here you go, here's the catch. So not much point really in jumping off the front on these kickers, unless what you do is you look in the rider list and you look to see, okay, how far's the next rider up the road, and if it's a closable gap, then by all means jump off the front on the climbs or the kickers. But no point in doing so if there's nobody to catch, which was the case there. But that's what I call racecraft. You learn these things as you get more experience riding. You learn when to save your energy, when to. I mean, this is not a race, but even so, I would still be using those kind of tactics. I would be looking at the rider list and deciding, okay, am I going to sit up? Am I going to push on? Am I going to put in an effort and try and catch the rider in front of me? Or am I going to wait until a small group comes up behind? And that's what makes it so exciting, these sportives, because the rides within a ride, or races within a ride, should I say. Poor old Lang has been distanced now and riding on his own. Then you've got the Ibexes. And then Wolfer, last man. Sorensen, as I say, has not started yet. It's time for me to just about jump back on the bike. So I'll do that as well. So let's go back to the front, stay with this group, and now get an overhead shot and then get back on the bike. There we go. So we're still 10 riders out on this front group, and they're on the first section of the slopes. In this case, the down slope, but then it will quickly transition into an upslope. But we're only talking like a few percent at most for these kickers in this early part of the ride. Where the profile, where you can see the slight brown orangey colour, that's where the gradient gets a little bit more meaty, but there's nothing, I don't think there's anything over 5% on this whole ride. And even then, when I say 5%, it's only for a few hundred meters. So not enough to cripple anybody. You know, the heavier riders have definitely got the advantage today because there's effectively no real hills on this ride. I mean, Chang is riding really well today. James Chang is really doing a good ride. So I hope and expect him to be there at the end. Could be one of my picks. I mean, I'm not going to decide yet, but it could be one of my picks for the first finisher today. Now, was that a rider spawning behind them, or was that, let's just pan back and find out, was that a rider being dropped off, or was it another new rider joining? It looked like a rider there, Vargas. You see, I can often spot them, and what you've got there is I spotted somebody just being dropped on the road, and that's what happens if you're late join. It drops you near the front, just behind the front group. So Vargas is a new rider. He's joining for the last 58 kilometres. I don't know whether he'll complete that distance, but he may well put in an effort because he's got fresh legs. He may well put in an effort to catch the riders in front of him who have done 38 kilometres. So this group have done 38, and Vargas has only done half a kilometre. Now you saw Suminen. He's a rider that's been dropped by the group. I didn't see him get dropped off, so I don't know when he got dropped off, but he's only 200 metres adrift, so it must have been around the time that we saw the new rider joining the ride, which is probably why I didn't spot it. So there's the new rider, and then this is another rider, but he joined a little bit earlier. He's done 4.5 kilometres. So we're getting riders dropped out. We had 2 drop out, but we've had 2 come back in. So we're still at 35 riders, which is nice. It's nice to see. And this is the rider that closed that huge gap the first time around. And he's still putting in a sterling effort here. He's not going to get back to the group, and he knows that just as well as I know that. But you know, I think he's going to ride his own ride until he's picked up by the group behind him, and that's going to take a while because he's putting in, he's putting in some good effort here. So this group aren't going to catch him anytime soon. I mean, we've got about a third of the distance done now, over a third of the distance done from the majority of the riders. Now, about the halfway point, I'm going to go and grab myself a coffee and a biscuit. So we'll keep an eye on what the front end are doing. I try not to miss the action on the hills, but I will stay with the race. I will just leave the camera running, and we'll see what happens. So we'll work our way through this group and see what's Wendland still in no man's land. And I'm actually surprised that these riders aren't riding, aren't making an effort to join together. Wendland, Mayer, and Rayner are all riding as individuals. Yeah, it's an individual ride, but why not? Why not share a bit of the workload? And then this was a group of 6, which has now become a group of 4. So maybe the reason why 2 of the riders are sort of like off the front of this small group is purely and simply because the pace, they considered the pace wasn't high enough. And that can be a reason for leaving a group behind. You're riding with a group and you find the pace is not quite what you want. So you decide to push on ahead. Now you've got to be doing a reasonable amount of change in distance to leave a group. Otherwise, there's just no point in it. But if you do find a group going too slow and you can take off and open up a decent gap, then it's worthwhile. If you just, maintaining like a 20, 30, 40 metre gap off the front of a group behind you, then there's absolutely no sense in it at all. But they're riding nicely together. Now, has Lang dropped off the back of the group in front, or have the 2 Ibex riders caught him and they're riding as a team together? And Wolfer, again, last man on the road. Now this is interesting. You've got Yuri has pulled out a 20-meter gap off the front of the group. This is not going to stick, I can tell you that. I don't need a crystal ball. This is definitely not going to stick. He's just probably testing the legs and wanting to see who the strong riders in the group are. And obviously he feels good himself. But they're going to pull him back and pretty quickly. Well, you can see it happening on the as I'm saying it. That's exactly what they're doing. They're just closing up on him. And Chang, look, my pick at the moment is just looking super strong, super strong. I mean, he's now opened up a 20-meter gap off the front. And Chang is the kind of rider that I feel could make it stick. I don't think he will. I don't think this is not him going. Look, he's in fact already you can see he was putting out red numbers and already he's easing up, and the group will catch him. But perhaps he's doing. I mean, they could well be teammates. Who knows? But perhaps he's just wanting to test the group and see, okay, who's going to chase me? Who are the strong riders? But it's not going to work on this kind of terrain. I'm sorry, but in a racing situation, I can understand it. In this situation, it's uh, it's a little bit futile because these 10 riders, I don't see anybody in this group standing head and shoulders above the rest at the moment. So I don't see anybody really bossing this group. But that can happen as we get into the slightly steeper kickers. We might be able to pick out a couple of riders that decide to take on um, the challenge of bossing the group, because the pace will go up as we get further into the ride, rather than the pace dropping. I think the pace will rise. This Jowery looks. He was one that jumped off the front and he's now pulling on the front, so he looks like he's a strong rider. He's putting out decent wattage. But it's way too early for um, anybody to decide to try and make a break. It's just not going to happen. Not so early in the ride. And just to explain that statement, in order to stay away from, a fast moving group like this, um, the group on the front here, you can see them doing 4 watt kilos regularly. That's what the front people are pulling this group along at. So if you're gonna push off the front and try and make a gap, you're gonna need to be doing 5 and keep it going for a considerable amount of time. And we've already seen how many of these riders are going to be able to do that. How many of them can actually um, ride at 5 watt kilos and keep it going for long enough to. They'd need 200 meters minimum to make a break. They'd need 200 meters and then grow 200 meters, but that's not going to happen. I think you'll agree with me there. So, but they are doing well. There's some nice changes of pace happening here and some nice through and off. So, yeah, almost 39 kilometers an hour. Yesterday's race finished at an average of over 40 kilometers an hour. So it was pretty fast paced. I'd expect today's race to be round about the 37, 38 kilometers an hour. Well, it's not a race today, sorry. Today's ride. But you try telling some of these riders it's not a race. Okay, let's check on what's happening behind. I can see that if we just work his way back slightly, we can see a rider hanging off the back. Or is it a rider catching? Oh no, it's Suminen, and he's coming back. So he's 20 meters adrift. Let's spin the camera around once more and watch and see if he can make the catch. I think he will. Yeah, he's got 5.5 watt kilos to spare, so he's definitely going to make this catch. You can always tell by watching a rider and the way that he closes the gap whether, I mean, he's done this with ease. He's easing up now, but he's done this with ease. When he's needed to, he's put in like 5.5 watt kilo effort and effortlessly closed this gap. So this wasn't even a struggle for him. Of that, I'm pretty convinced. He's looking very strong. So let's spin round and have a look and see if there's nobody else behind this group in view at all. So if we work his way back, we'll find out. Vargas, he's one of the late joiners, so he's still in no man's land and he's not closing on the gap, he's pegging it. And what I mean by the term pegging it, what that means is that the gap isn't growing, but it's not shrinking either. That's what pegging it means. And he's just there in no man's land. And this is our friend who got distanced earlier. Another late joiner. And then we have this nice little group. Whatever happened to May though? I don't. Did he simply drop out? Did he have? I mean, I suspect that there was a problem with his trainer because I think he was doing over 5 watt kilos for more than 10 minutes, and that's not realistic. So could there have been an issue and he decided to pull the plug? I don't know. I'm only speculating here. I'm certainly not accusing anybody, and I'm not, because May proved his worth earlier on in the series. He did a stunning ride. So I know that he's a good rider and I know that he can work hard. Now, remember me saying to you that there's very, very little point in having a 20-meter gap off a group. You're either going to leave the group and pull out a gap significantly, or you're going to stay with the group. This is totally nonsensical. He's not growing the gap. He's pegging it. He's keeping it around 20 meters. I think they will catch him, and they are doing so now. But there's no sense in it. There's absolutely no sense in leaving a group unless you are doing significantly more watt kilos, or unless you're aiming to catch the man in front of you. Now this group will catch them if I just work my way back up, look, and he's out the back now. So I really don't understand why. Now he's getting to the front, but I don't understand why. Now they'll catch this fellow. So they're 130 meters behind him. So they're going to catch, but he's a late joiner, so there's not much merit in catching him, but he will join the group and he will make up another rider to pull the group along, which is no bad thing. So there they go. I think we've got 7 here, so it'll be a group of 8 very, very shortly. work my way through these and see what's behind them. And then Mayer, don't know where he was, but oh yes, of course, he was riding with Rayner for a little while, but now they've separated. So have this little group. Now this was a group of 6, so you can see that the riders have actually separated on the road for whatever reasons. Pace, more than likely. Now, I don't recognise this name and I don't recognise the rider, so I don't know where this lady has come from, but all I can say is I haven't. She's obviously doing the full distance. Because that's the first time I've noticed her. These two are doing a really good ride together. Get on his wheel, lass. Yeah, that's the way to go. But if you look at her watt kilo, she's doing a fair share of work as well. So she's not letting him do all the work. That's for sure. I mean, I'll stay on this picture, and it's something that I mentioned yesterday and on Friday as well. One of the things I don't understand about RGT is how the women have to put out more watt kilos, but yet, I mean, look at the watt kilo difference here, but the women have to put out more watt kilos, yet get no benefit for it. They don't go, like if a man puts out more watt kilo than the man in front of him, he's going to overtake him. Why is the woman putting out more watt kilos and not coming past? I mean, it's not happening now, but there, it just, yeah, look, she's putting in red numbers just to stay on the wheel, and I don't know, just anyway. But this lady here, I don't recall seeing her earlier in the ride. So where was she? My apologies, Nick. I really apologise if I've missed you, but I don't recall seeing you earlier. We've got penultimate rider on the road, and then you've got Wolfer, who's Lantern Rouge. And then, of course, oh, have we got somebody out front? No, well, we have. So S Wins has pulled off the front. Wow. Now, this is not going to stick. Again, I'm sticking my neck out. This is not going to stick. He's got a 90-metre gap, but it's not enough. This is not going to hold. The group behind will catch him. Now, there's a statement from me. But I know my stuff, and I know for a fact that a chasing group as big as the one behind him will catch. 90 metres is not enough. Good effort, though. I mean, this is the kind of combativity that we want to see. So he's putting his name forward for the combativity prize, because this is impressive to pull out. I mean, I don't know what the gap was at its highest point. We joined it when it was at 90. It's coming down pretty quickly now. But that's impressive to pull out a 90-metre gap on a group like the one chasing him. Is pretty good going. But I'm not saying I told you so, but there's no way it's going to stick. And he's pegging it at the moment, and in fact he grew it for a few revolutions, but it's not going to stick because it's too early. It's too early to have a lone breakaway. on this kind of profile. Your lone breakaways like this work when you've got some hills, some steep ups and steep downs, but not when you've got like, what is there, just 300 meters of ascent total for this ride. And there they go. Now the question is, let's zoom out and watch. The question now is he going to pay for his effort, or is he strong enough to stay with the group that have come past him? Because quite often somebody making such a bold move off the front will find the group catching them and then get spit out the back. I mean, that happens a lot in pro cycling, and certainly there's no reason why it can't happen here. But to be fair to the lad, he's up the front and staying up the front. So, but the group has been whittled down. One of the consequences of him jumping off the front is that he's managed to shed at least 2 riders. So I'm going to stay with this group for a while because I want to see what happens, whether this splinters up even more. We've got a rider up the front pushing the pace. And there you can see Wynn's just lost the wheel slightly. He'll get back on. I have no doubt he'll get back on, but he just lost the wheel slightly there. Let's see if we can get an overhead through the trees view. There we go. Okay. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many? 9. So we've lost at least 2 riders. Let's flick back behind them and find out who's been distanced. If I spin the camera around, can we see anybody on the road? Nope. So there's nobody within sight of this group. So what we'll have to do then, in order to find out what's happened behind them, is work his way through the group. And there we go. So we got the hook, and it looks like he's stopping. Don't understand why. No, he's going again. His power numbers have come back. So it looks like he might have had a dropout, but or he might just have not been strong enough to keep the group when they increase pace to catch the rider that had gone off the front wins. Whatever reason, he got dropped by the group and he's now 420 meters off the pace, and that's going out as well. The front group are putting a strong effort in raising the pace, as I said they would. So he's not going to get back to the group. I think his only hope is this is a new rider that's joined the ride. So what could happen is, if this fella's strong enough and he catches up with, let's just go with the Hoog. So if these two join forces, they could potentially pull back some distance, but the Hoog is not going to catch that front group, certainly without a major wheel to follow. And it doesn't look like this guy's riding strong enough to do that. Okay, and we know all about this fellow. This is the one that got distanced early on. Vargas is another one of our late joiners. He looks like he's just out for the ride now. I think there's a couple of late joiners in. I mean, some of these have ridden the whole distance, but no, they're all going the full distance by the look of it. Although Strauss, for some reason, is showing lesser distance, so something must have happened to him. And he was further up the field, so he might well have had a dropout. Normally, just to explain, normally when you see riders who have got good figures like Strauss has got here, but you total up the distance and you see, nope, there's a couple of kilometres missing there, it usually indicates that they've had a dropout, that they've left the ride and then come back in pretty quickly. So they've only lost a kilometre, a couple of kilometres. And my guess is that's what's happened with Strauss, because he's showing like 46 and 47, which doesn't total 96. So he's going to be slightly short at the end. And then, of course, Truvos, I think, was riding. I think he rode the Sportive the other day, so he's doing well. Ridden both Sportives. And obviously, I can't cover the race and the Sportive, so he could well have ridden yesterday's as well with some of these riders. Another late joiner here. So although we're having riders leaving the ride, we're getting riders joining all the time, which, as I say, is nice to see because it keeps the rider count high. Got Maya and Rainer on the road. Kindin. These were riding. Now Nick was riding on her own for a little while, so I still don't understand why I didn't pick up on her earlier. I thought Anne Ibex was the only lady riding, but it's difficult to tell. There's Kay Lang and there's Wolf, our last man. So back to the front. Still got 1, 2, 3. We've got 9 riders in this front group. So it's slowly whittling down. And that effort by Wins, that was probably the point of it. He probably realised he wasn't going to hold the break, and it was probably to find out, okay, can we get rid of 1 or 2 more? And there he goes again, look. So I'm going to stay with him this time and watch what happens. See if we can follow him on the road. Look, he's definitely feeling strong because he's putting in strong digs here. I mean, 6.7 watt kilos, look, 7.7 even. So he's definitely got good legs on him today, and wanting to. And this is one of the downslopes, but very quickly it's going to turn into an upslope. So he's putting in a bit of a good effort here. Now that looks like either somebody spawning or somebody being dropped from this group. Can't tell which it was. Get to the front to quickly change views. It looks like a new rider joining because I don't see any. I think I count 9 here. So yeah, obviously a new rider joining. But I'm really impressed with Wins, and he's definitely in the running for a combativity prize. Who's that going off the front? Let's find out. Hogan. I mean, that's where one of my complaints about this spectator view is that you can't choose riders with a mouse. But okay, we'll be back in shortly, guys. Once again, I've been kicked out. You can't choose riders with the mouse, but what is nice is as you're following the front rider off the group, you can use the end key on the keyboard to take you to the first rider. So you can always sort of like very quickly get to the man that's broken off the front. And that's really clever, because if you're having a sprint and one man is behind and then all of a sudden he catches, you can immediately switch to the man that's caught. Now, once again, I've been kicked out because I didn't get on the bike within the 30-minute period. And if you look at the time, 15:26. Now you would say to yourself, well, okay, because that's what I was looking at. I was thinking I had till 15:30 to get back on the bike. So that's why I missed it. I really wish they'd give commentators their own admin for these rides so that we don't have to jump on the bike. I know I'm hammering the point home. This is like the 50th time I've mentioned it, but this is just so annoying to constantly get kicked out of the ride and have to respawn, have to come back in again. is very, very annoying. Okay, there we go. So we'll get back in and then we'll return to the ride. But it's just annoying because I'm losing, I'm losing part of the race. Now it won't happen towards the end. I can promise you that because I'll be jumping on the bike every 20 minutes to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I shouldn't have to. That's my point. So we rejoin as Wins is pulling the group along on the front again. But to be fair, there he is, and there he goes again. 9 kilos, having another dig. Definitely got good legs, so I'm glad I've got back. We've got back in time to see this. Definitely up there for the combativity prize. And then you can see that he's not trying to break away here. What he's doing is he's like trying to break the group up. He's trying to splinter it because he's putting in a really big dig, and then he's sitting up. Well, I'm saying sitting up. He's easing up. He's not. I mean, you can see the riders behind now. The red number 6. The rider behind is pulling the group along. He's doing 6 kilos, 6.7. So, and that's the whole point of what Wins is doing here. He knows that, only the strong riders are going to be able to pull him back. And eventually the weaker riders are going to get spit out the back. But this group has been whittled down. It was, well, how many was it when we first started? Was it, it was in the 20s, wasn't it? So it's been whittled down and whittled down. And maybe there's a case to be made for the fact that you can see that last push didn't get rid of any of these riders. So maybe we're left with the riders that are going to go all the way to the finish. Maybe these riders are strong enough to stay with the group. Now that didn't happen yesterday in the race. What happened was, I thought it would. I thought we'd have a group of at least, sort of like 8 or 9 riders staying together right to the very end. But they whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down, and then towards the end of the ride, when the final breaks were being made, there was only a small handful of riders together. I think 6 altogether. So, and then of course Jan Decker just absolutely obliterated the field with a 15 kilo sprint. I mean, it was just amazing to watch because I didn't think he was going to close the gap on the rider that had gone off the front. And it was a fantastic race. And like I say, if you haven't watched it, it's on my channel. Live streamed yesterday. You don't have to watch it all, but the whole race was fantastic in the tactics being used by 2 of the main teams, OTR and RR Racing. So I'd recommend it if you want to see a bit of canny racecraft and tactics, because it was pretty good, pretty phenomenal. But this is turning into a really good. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect riders to be doing, big efforts like this off the front. I just thought, oh, the riders are grouped to the end, and then we'll have a sprint. So this is getting exciting. I'm really pleased with this. I thought it was going to be just another dull ride, but it's not. It's turning into quite an exciting ride. Because who's your money on here? I mean, is Wins going to pay for these efforts? And is he working for, has he got a friend? Is he working for a friend? Is he working for himself? Because you've no team names coming up on screen here. So I've no idea who the teams are. not wearing team jerseys, are they? So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. I mean, what are we now? We're getting towards the 2/3 distance. 60 kilometers gone with 35 remaining. So almost 2/3 distance gone. Now you've got two really nasty little kickers um, before the final one. Right at you can see from the profile, right at the very end of the ride, you've got that last kicker, and that will definitely sort out whoever's left in this group. It won't be decisive, but it will certainly get rid of the ones whose legs are feeling the 90 odd kilometers that they'll have ridden by the time they get there. And I think we just saw a rider getting distance. So let me see if we can pan around and down the road. I can't see anybody, but I'm pretty sure somebody did. How many have we got here? Let's see if we can zoom in and count. Too close together at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, they've dropped one. There's 8 riders now here. So let's find out who the rider is that's gone by working as there you go, that's a better view. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I can't even see the rider on the road behind them. So I'm going to work my way back through this group and we're going to find out. Okay, now these two riders, I said they'd come together. These two, obviously Verhoeven's done the full distance, but he's with that Nutilla. And I did say that they could work together and pull back some of the distance, which to their credits they've done. But I don't know who the rider is that got dropped off here. I really don't, because he's not in. So whoever it was is out of the race. He's decided I've had enough. I can't do any more. Because he's not still riding in the race. He's obviously dropped out. And yeah, if you look at the figures now, we've got 28. So I think this constant upping of the pace by Wins and Yowie in particular has really shaken up this group. And some of the riders are sort of finding it hard work to stay with it. I mean, you can see that some of the riders at the back are sort of like putting in surges to close up the small gaps. Like there's a small gap there now. I mean, it's insignificant, but you have to keep putting in surges to close these small gaps, and pretty soon your legs are screaming at you. I mean, look at the guy on the back now having to close this gap, almost gone, and he's made it. He's got on the wheel, but then he's easing up as he gets on the wheel, and if the group put in a spurt, he'll get distance again and have to put in another jump. All good tactics. I mean, this is really interesting racing. And at the front, of course, you've got Wins just absolutely battering them. He's really trying to break this group up, and he's managed to shed one in the last few meters. So can he get rid of a few more? I think the next opportunity to do that is when we reach them 2 small orange kickers you can see just coming up, because it's reasonably flat for the next. This is just a small rise that they've gone over, but it's reasonably flat now for a good few kilometres. Okay, folks, I'm going to go and have a comfort break and make myself a coffee. So I'm going to leave the race coverage with Wins, because I don't see him being dropped. And then you're going to be able to watch any jumps if he goes off the front. I'm going to go for a coffee and I'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes. So let's just Okay, we're back again. What's been happening while I've been away? Are we still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? We're still 8 riders, so no change there. And but we've got a hill coming up, so things could change on this next hill if we get one of the riders pushing ahead. But before they get there, let's just have a quick look and see what's happening behind the rest of the field. So let's work our way through this group. And Nutilla, again, as I say, he's one of the riders that's freshly joined. And then you have a small group. Now they're riding for minor places, these riders, because obviously they're too far behind the front group to close the gap. So they're just making up a nice group and riding together, which is absolutely the right thing to be doing. Vargas is another late joiner, if you remember. He's dropped back through the field a little bit. Another late joiner, Corrickson. And yet another late joiner, Hussein. But Mayer's one of the riders doing the full distance. He's now riding well and truly on his own. Although Rayner's not that far behind him. And then you have this couple, the Ibex couple, have really done well in terms of catching riders on the road. I don't know what happened to Nick. We'll find out in a moment as we watch these riders. There we go. And I'm not sure, but it looks like we've lost our Lantern Rouge. Wolfer, as it looks like, has packed in. Hopefully Nick will be going all the way. And Lang is now our Lantern Rouge. And again, I really hope Lang gets to do the full event, finishes off the ride. But back to the front, we still have the 8 out the front. Now I'm going to be munching away on a few biscuits now and drinking my coffee. So you'll have to forgive the background noise. Or maybe I could just mute it. I'm really impressed with how Windsor's riding this ride, though. I mean, if he gets to the finish with this group, pulling this group along, that will be a pretty impressive ride, because is he going to pay for all these efforts he's putting in? Or is he simply strong enough, one of the strongest riders in this group? So they're just cresting the slope now, and then it's a slight downhill before the sharp little what we call a kicker, the sharp little uphill. So will we see an attack on this little kicker, or will we just see the pace raise slightly and the group stay together? Okay, so this is the kicker. I don't know what percentage it goes up to, but it's just very, it's too short to make any significant difference. It's a big ring kind of job, but there you go. You can see it went up to 4.7%, so, and 6 even. But it's not, and that's the end of it. It's not long enough to significantly sort out a group like this. You know, they're over the top. They finished it now. They're on the so the next one is slightly longer. What's happening at the front? Let's get to the front and find out. Yeah. So the next one is slightly longer, but that's the first of the what I call mini kickers out of the way. And it hasn't changed the group dynamic at all. So I don't expect to be fair. I don't expect the next one to either. Um, I think this is going down to the wire. I think these riders will probably get all the way to that last decent sized hill, and that could decide it, or we could end up with a bunch sprint at the end. I mean, Hogan's making a good effort on the front here to try and break the group up, but not going to happen. Here comes Wins. So jumped off the front again, pushing the pace up, but quickly eased up. Now, is that a sign that he's tiring, or is that just a sign that he's saving himself for later in the ride? That's something we can't really know at this point. I mean, the key is how well and how quickly he changes position. And I think he's just answered the question there. It looks comfortable. So yeah, I'd expect to see some big digs from him as we get into the more difficult terrain towards the end of very end of the ride. Or we could try a few more on this section after the next kicker. I don't know. I mean, there's going to be some tired legs here. 73 kilometres gone. But the time, they're doing really good time as well. Okay, let's just have a quick look at what's happening behind. So we'll leave this group behind. Stucky's a late joiner. So this lady is on her own at the moment, in between, but she'll very quickly be caught by another late joiner, I suspect Nutella. And then you have this small group. Vargas is still plugging away on his own in the middle. Van Breek was a regular. Nice to see he's still churning it out. Rickson. Okay, this is another one of our long-term riders. Mayer, looking good. This is Reina. Indian, another one. So all these riders, the last three that I've just highlighted, they're all doing the full distance, as is Miss Nick here. And then we're back with the leaders. So it looks like we've had another rider dropping out from the and in fact, if you look at the rider numbers now, we're down to 23. So we've had a significant amount of riders dropping out, which, to be fair, you would expect. Not every rider is going to want to ride, the full distance. You have to be seriously hardcore to want to spend 3 hours. Let's find out who's jumping off the front. Now, is Van der Lip? Okay. I mean, Joy and Win seem to be working together. So obviously they're both Germans, but they do seem to be having some kind of a plan between them. It's fluctuating a lot here now with this group. See if we can find a nice side-on view of them. It's difficult with the trees. So how many have we got here? Have we still got 8 riders? I think so, yes. Yeah. So there's an argument that these 8 will go all the way to the finish now. They've done all the hard work with the exception of that one last Kickr, and obviously the finish. Oh, this is so annoying. And again. Okay. We'll be rejoining in a moment. Gives me a chance to finish my coffee. Okay, back with the action. And has there been any change? Has anybody been dropped out? Let's see if we can find out. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we have. We've had a change. So I'm sorry, folks, that we've missed. Obviously, we've shedded 2 riders from this group now. So what I'm going to do is quickly work my way back from this small group and have a look and see if we can pick up the riders that have got dropped. No, it looks like... Okay, so what's happened with the riders that have been dropped off this group is they've either pulled the plug. No, this doesn't make sense. They've pulled the plug or they've had a dropout. Now, just looking at the rider list, Wins has gone. And I can't believe that he would just pull the plug. So has he had a technical? I'm going to message and see if I can find out. I mean, I'm really, really surprised by that. And who's the other rider that's gone? Wins has gone. No, Yuri's still in, so his compatriot is still there. Puncture, a virtual puncture or a real, has got a wheel on train and a real puncture. Well, my pick out of this group is Chang. But I'm just so surprised and a little annoyed that I missed whatever happened to Wins. I mean, RGT really need to give us this spectate mode and not have us messing around jumping on and off the bloody bike. It's getting a bit silly. Especially when you have to do, this is a 3 hour long ride. So, well, it's going to be over 3 hours for the tail enders. And it's ridiculous to keep having to jump on the bike. But it does look like this group is being thinned down. As we see, we're still 6, but we've got one rider yo-yoing off the back a little. Or no, he looks safe. He looks sound. Been a really good war of attrition, this. Some good solid riding. Okay, let's find out what's happening behind. Alvarez is a new rider that's just joined. Nutilla is the rider that joined us a short while ago. Stuck is a new rider joined. And then some of these are doing the full distance, and some of them we've picked up a Games, the rider that was dropped, so he'll hopefully, will he hang on to this group, or is he just too uh, and then Van Brekel has finally found somebody to ride with, although it looks like he may well just go on past. Maybe not. Mia's still churning it out. Vena. And it looks like the yeah, I'm really surprised by that as well. So it looks like King is packed in, and the two Ibex riders. So we've had a fair. I wonder if there's been a glitch in the software or the server, because to lose, I mean, they were look at the Ibex riders were looking really strong, as was King. I don't know. I mean, some riders will have come on the ride never intending to finish the ride, to ride the full distance, but it's still surprising when you see riders riding very strongly and then all of a sudden kicked out. So Kindin was the last man on the road now. And these six are going to battle it out between themselves. There's not going to be a change in this group now until we get to that last hill. And is that going to be decisive? Is that last hill going to decide this finish, or is it going to come down to a sprint? Now I'm going to message the riders, because what we found out yesterday in the race was that they go under the finish banner, but it's not the finish. The virtual riders basically replicated the real ride, the real end of the Paris Roubaix, which finishes in the velodrome. So you actually go under the finish banner, but you've still got a lap to do. And it confused me yesterday doing the commentary. It definitely confused the riders, although thankfully, um, I think the majority of them kept on riding after they went under the finish banner the first time. So it didn't affect the end of the race, but it certainly confused riders. It confused me as a commentator. I didn't know that was going to happen. So I'm going to message and message the riders. The Chavez need to get there first. let's see if we can return to the action, find out what's going on. Nagy, is he doing a push off the front? No, I just don't see anybody splitting this group up just yet. On the Kickr, maybe, but not just yet. So they're staying together, these 6 riders. Okay, we're down to 10 kilometres. Just past that mark, so we'll take a look down the field and see what's happening. These 6 look like they're going to ride to the finish together. Now these riders that I'm flicking through now, those 3 that I've just passed, they're all late joiners. So while I'm going to watch them coming into the finish, I'm mostly interested in the riders like these riders that have done the full distance. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the late joiners. It's nice to see this group has stayed together and picked up Tapia Agamas. So I hope they all ride into the finish together. Van Brekel obviously left behind Vargas, but Vargas is a late joiner, so Van Brekel is just doing his own pace, wanting to get to the finish. Mayer, he's going to finish as well, 22 kilometres remaining. So there's going to be quite a difference between last man on the road and the first finishers, because the first finishers are going to finish well in front of these riders on the road. Now, I'm not going to wait for late joiners if by any means they're the last people on the road. I don't think they will be. I don't think the late joiners are going to be the last riders on the road. I think these 2 are going to be the last riders. And I will wait for you to finish if you're listening, folks. So make sure you do get over that finish line, because I'm going to watch you home. I think that's only fair if they can put in the effort to finish the ride. But back to the front, and we have 8.7 kilometres to go. So we're getting very close to where this race is going. Where this ride is going to be decided. Um, it's a sportive. It's not officially a race, but these 6 riders are racing it. Trust me on that. And who's your money on? Um, to be honest, I don't know that much about them. I've seen James Chang and Nagy riding before, and in fact, yeah, I know Dishablis as well. But my money's on James Chang, but I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't count out Nagy because he's a pretty strong rider and a strong finisher. But I expect to see these 6 split on the Kickr that's coming up pretty quickly. So we'll see what happens. And anybody that sort of like drops off the back, even a tiny gap, is going to get distance as they start to up the pace into the finish. So um, you really need to keep the pace. I mean, I say that, and immediately I say that, look what happens. I'll just see if I can swing around. Vonderlip, look, is struggling to close the gap at the back, and he's burning matches by having to do that. So I could well end up paying for that little sprint he's had to make to rejoin the group as we get further into towards the finish. And there he is, you see, he's yo-yoing off the back again. So is he, or is it somebody else? Oh no, it's I don't expect any change in this. I think the 6 of them will ride at least until they hit the climb, and it's a very short climb. It's a big ring job. It goes up to I think about 6%. I seem to remember. So it'll test the legs, but it's too short really to be of significance. They'll just hit it in the big ring and then out of the saddle and power up it, and then once they reach the crest, it's all downhill to the finish. So it's a very fast finish, and it's a twisty finish. Once they get onto the velodrome, obviously it's flat then, but it's a fast finish, and it's because it's a circular finish. It's a left-hand circle. I have to follow it carefully with the camera because of the trees. Because it's such a tight circle, the trees obscure the finish line. That's what I found yesterday. So I'm a bit more aware today. I'll be able to do a better job, I think, of catching the finish. Um, I've already warned the riders that they go under the finish banner and then they have to go under it again. They can't stop pedaling, but it it certainly caught us out yesterday, and even the riders were confused by it. So yeah, so Chablis has just got a 15-metre gap off the front, but he's going nowhere with the Kickr coming up. So I'm going to stay with these front riders now until the end, because this is where the excitement is. And then we'll work his way back through the field as we watch these riders coming in. I don't think Dishablis will pull out this gap. I think the riders behind him have pegged it at 15 metres, and um, I think they won't allow him to pull away. Because if a rider gets a gap actually and takes it to the Kickr, Um, there's a very good chance that, out of the saddle, up the Kickr, and the gap would grow exponentially as he crests the climb, and possibly be able to take it all the way to the finish. A strong rider, so they're not gonna let a gap form now going into this last climb. It just wouldn't make any sense at all to have done all this work and then let a rider ride off the front. So, but Deschables is putting in some really good work here. Numbers going red and really trying to maintain a gap. I mean, he's got 24 meters now, so it's growing. And if he hits this climb, I honestly think a 50-meter gap would be enough if you and the group are on the climb. So I think they've got to peg it, and they are doing they're not allowing him to get much more than this, even though he's putting in more effort. Um, let's see if we can just zoom out and see the group on the road behind him. There they are. It's stringing them out though, and they haven't hit the climb yet. So this is stringing them out. Let's see if we can get a better view with the trees, because this is an awkward. It's really difficult to try and keep all the riders in view on such a twisty circuit with you can see the difficulty I'm having with the trees. But there they go, they've caught him, and now they're starting the rise and the climb. So I'm going to try and twist the cameras round as we follow them from above, so that we can see what's happening. It's very difficult because it's getting very twisty now. So keeping the riders in view is pretty difficult. There we go. I know I struggled yesterday when it got towards the end. So you've got Dijori, who I reckon was riding pretty well, running off the front. You need to keep switching views to keep on the action. So this is the last chance to break the group up. This is definitely last chance saloon for any of the riders that want to break free. And you can see that he's pulled out a little bit of a gap to the three behind. So these three could well be, and my man isn't in it. These three could be taking this gap to the finish. Let's just zoom in a little bit and see if we can find. There you go. Look. So yeah, you've got three riders, but two really that are pulling away. Now then, it looks like a two-man race. Tishauri and Suminen. And there they go. They're cresting the hill. So it's more or less downhill now until they get to the velodrome. So this is going to be a fast racing. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to try and stay with them and amongst the trees. You can see they've well left. They've really opened up a gap on the riders behind. I'm staying with the front end purely and simply because it doesn't make any sense not to do so. These are going to come into the finish. So, in fact, having said that, with 3 kilometers to go, let's just see what's happening behind. No, they're not going to close the gap. They're just not going to close that gap. So it's a two-man race now. They've got a 140-meter gap, which is more than enough on a downhill section. And once they get onto the velodrome, they're not going to get caught. So who's your money on between these two? I mean, I've already called my winner, and he's out of it. So between these two, I fancy the man in second at the moment. But 'cause he was working well with Wins early on. I just can't believe that Wins has left the race. So it must have been something beyond his control. Wonder if we can follow them from behind and then I get a sight of the road. There we go. Might be able to follow. This might be the best view because then I can see the changes coming up. Now, as I say, remember that when you see the finish banner, that's not the finish banner. They have to go under the finish banner, and that's the start. That's basically signifies the start of the last lap in the velodrome. So, and they're getting pretty close to it now. The gap is coming down. The riders behind. I'm surprised that these two riders have not kept their gap. And in fact, they look to be easing up slightly. So the gap's 70 meters now. And that could, let's just very quickly swing round and see the chasing riders are going to pull this back, I think, because they can see them on the road, and that's a good enough carrot when coming into the finish. So you've got the 1 kilometre kite coming up. If they can pull up to within 50 meters, they could pull it back. No, I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to call it. But they are closing the gap slightly. I still think one of these two is going to take the win. Yes, they are. Yeah, with a kilometre to go, the chasers aren't close enough unless they've got a sprint like Decker had the other day. I mean, if it was Decker in the following group, then I'd put my money on him. But yeah, can I switch the view around? Get behind the guys. There we go. Because it's now very difficult to follow because of the twists and turns. Very difficult. There we go. Doing my best to follow it. There we go. So who's your money on? Now there's the banner that I told you about. So they go under the finish banner. Now please don't let's see anybody stop cycling. Zooming and looks strong, but I still think Yaoi rather will take him. Come on, let's make sure you get it. Don't lose them. Don't lose them. Yeah, there we go. There we go. And the finish line is just round this bend. There we go. Almost impossible to find the finish line. Here we go. It's a horrible finish to try and cover, folks. I'm very sorry, but it's obscured by the trees. They're going around sharp bends. It's obscured by the trees, so it's very difficult to actually show the finish. And in fact, if I can get to the finish line and show it in shot, I'm going to stay with that view and not switch. So let's see if we can follow Dishablis into the finish line. Really is horrible, this. You just... There we go. Okay, I'm going to stay with this view if I can. Oh, shit! I hate this. Excuse my French. come on, allow me to get back in. No, I think that's it. Is it letting me back in? Yes, it is. Okay. But we're gonna be missing finishers now. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it actually. You you can't follow a race if you're constantly having to jump on a bloody bike. Especially when it's getting exciting and the action is happening like that. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I'm pretty sure Mike Lister doesn't have to go through all this. He must. There must be a way of allowing commentating view. There must be, because this is just silly. Really demoralising. This. Work so hard covering an event and then you miss the finish. Find out where we are. Find out how many riders we've got left. I mean, it's not even showing me moving, so I don't know what's going on. I really don't. Okay, so it is showing. Nutilla's a late joiner, so I'm not bothered about him. Stuck is a late joiner. Now this group, so 5.8 kilometers with this group. I really apologise, folks, but I'm just at a loss with this constantly being kicked out of the ride. It's just a nonsense. And you can see I'm really struggling to follow what's happening with the ride as well now. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm not waiting till the end of this ride. I do apologise. I'll follow these riders in, and then I'm calling it a day. Just totally demoralised now. I'm going to get on the forum and I'm going to ask why you have to constantly ride this. These riders have done well to stay together though, and Capia Agames was the rider that put in that huge effort to get back to the group when he was dropped. Um, So it's nice to see him saving some energy riding with these guys and actually finishing the ride off. But full kudos to everybody that finishes this ride, because 96 kilometers, is no small feat. They're riding well as well. There's a nice steady pace that they're keeping up. So anyway, as these riders are coming into the finish, we'll wrap up the broadcast. But um, this is week 3 of the 4-week series. Next weekend we have Liège Bastion Liège, and that's the final part of this March Monuments series. Same format as this week. We have the Sportive on the Friday, the Sportive, I think, at 1 o'clock on the Saturday, and the race at 2 o'clock. This is GMT time. The race at 2 o'clock on the Saturday. So I'll be covering the race again next week, the final race. And then you'll have the Sportive again on the Sunday. So it's a full weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll cover all 3 days. The race standings is really hotting up because Decker, we've taken first place yesterday. I haven't looked at the final points, but I know that Maxime Turcot must still be top, I would have thought, because he's had a first, a second, and a sixth he finished yesterday. Decker's got a third and a first. I'm not sure. I don't think he rode the first race, so it's going to be interesting. It could all come down to the last. I don't know whether Maxime can be caught, but it could all come down to the last race, and anything can happen. So I'm certainly looking forward to next week because it's a climbers course as well. It's going to be quite. As we watch Chungus, I'm surprised he's jumped off the front of this group actually. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting weekend. If I can shed this cold, which I've had for a week, and the reason why I'm not actually riding today, and don't really want to be jumping on the bike and off it again, because I'm absolutely full of cold. But if I can shake it, then I will be riding the Sportive next weekend, as well as covering it. Um, but if you've enjoyed the broadcast despite the glitches, then please give me a thumbs up, hit the like button, and if you're not already subscribed, if you subscribe to the action, you'll be notified of when we go live. Now, as well as covering this series and other races, I cover the cycling time trials 10 mile evening 10 on Mondays. So that's tomorrow night. And that's 1900 GMT, 2000 CET. So looking forward to that one. It's always a good race. And then on Tuesday we have the Team 3R group ride, and again repeated on Thursday. So I'm online a fair bit in terms of broadcasting. But I hope you've enjoyed this coverage. It's been a good ride and a good finish. Just really, really upset that I got kicked out as as riders were finishing after the first few, the first group got home. That's not very professional. And yeah, okay. So who have we got still on the road? We got this small group following on from Mr. Chungis here. So he's 1.4, other one just behind him. So we'll watch him into the finish. What I think should have been done here with this ride, and this is no sort of criticism of Samir, who uh, the roads have been digitised by Samir Dwortley, Samir's Magic Roads, but I think they could have left out that last loop because for two reasons. It's confusing to have to go under the finish banner, and also the circular velodrome is just you can see the difficulty I'm having trying to cover it. Um, I mean, I'll try and follow this ride around as he takes the twists and turns, but it's a nightmare to try and cover. I mean, maybe I'll tell you what, mate. I'll tell you what. Let's try something else. Why don't we try? Let's see if the software will allow me to switch camera view and go to what does drone give me? Does drone? Yeah. Okay, so let's stay in drone mode and then hopefully, oh, maybe I should have done this first time around because that stays overhead on and then we can actually work his way through the trees. Ah, you see, even I'm still, there's my name on the road, even I'm still learning. This is all new to me. So I've just found a way of actually staying with the rider. Yeah, because the mouse wheel doesn't work now, and I can't switch the camera around because I've changed to the manual mode, which is race view. Now the question is, will it allow me to flick to the next rider on the list when this rider? No, it doesn't, and there's the problem. So you can switch to manual mode, but only follow one rider. Um, yeah, here we go. Here's another rider coming in. There we go. And yeah, I'm gonna okay. And Stuckis is a late rider. So I'm gonna call it. There's Van Brekel. I'm gonna call it here. If you've stuck with me this far, thanks for watching as we watch Van Brekel on the road. But I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll switch to camera view again and let's have a look at what does third person give us. There we go. So we'll stick with Van Brekel to the finish, and then I'm going to end the broadcast. You see, I can't swing the camera around at all now because I'm in manual mode, and while that stays with the rider, it's very difficult to. What does Moto give us? Oh, Moto gives us a side-on view of the rider. There we go. I still think for the overhead shot and watching the rider, the drone view, which is this current view, is the best. But then you lose the functionality of being able to switch to the next rider on the road. So I'm going to watch Van Brekel come in, and then I'm going to end the broadcast, and we'll see you all later on in the week. I'm really not happy with today's broadcast, so this is I can do much better than this. But some of the glitches were way beyond my control, and I set myself you know, a high benchmark really. Yeah, you see how the when you're in drone mode, in manual mode, you see how it automatically flicks the camera around. Trying to do this myself, trying to follow the contours of the road is a little bit more difficult than this, whereas the auto um, mode just purely and simply stays in the same view from above. But had I used this yesterday for the race, I wouldn't have been able to switch to the second, third, and fourth riders on the road. So this view is okay for a solo rider. Now you can see him going under the banner for the first time. So it's okay to follow a solo rider, but it's absolutely hopeless and useless to try and follow a race because you'd have to very quickly try. Yeah, and that just sums it up. My phone's died, so okay. And the other thing that was off yesterday was if you watch the meters counting down, the finishing meters were well off yesterday for some of the riders because that's what I was watching to see them finish, and that finished okay for Van Brekel, but yesterday that was off as well. Anyway, that's the end of the broadcast, folks. Thanks for watching. Um, I'm going to end the stream here and stay safe, and we'll see you all later.